Hi, I'm Jason Seamus. Thank you for joining us here today.
And I'm Owen Banahan, and we work on the agency development team here at Google.
Today, we're going to talk about how to craft really compelling, engaging storytelling conversations through these presentations. So these are all things that we really make mistakes on, and kind of everyone is guilty of it, including us. Yeah. But we want to call them out and make sure that we're really working actively to fix it. Before we get into the data, we want to actually walk through a few housekeeping items and make sure we're kind of all on the same page. So one, there's going to be a live Q&A right after the session. So feel free to log on, post your questions to the dashboard there on the North America Google Partners page, and just do hashtag #AskTheExpert. We're going to play experts today. And then you can also do it through the Hangout app. Second, we're doing this framework based on one of our own internal Googlers. His name's Avinash Kaushik. So he is actually our internal kind of liaison for teaching everyone how to present more effectively. And he does really, really compelling videos and lessons on how to do so. One of the things he posted was on his blog, Occam's Razor. So this is actually his framework for the 10 rules or principles, I believe what he calls it, that you would use when you want to craft these really compelling stories. So you can really manifest this in any way you want. We're going to focus on PowerPoint. But if you're doing this in a meeting for breakfast or lunch or dinner or cocktails or whatever it is, really just follow this framework and you'll be able to really craft that compelling story. We're also going to post the entire link to the partners page, so you'll have access to it and you can follow up, and you can actually comment to him directly and he'll respond. He's really, really approachable. So yeah, that's it. Before we get into the first principle, we want to kind of, again, set the stage. So why is storytelling really important? So this is a video here by Jennifer Aker. We're not going to play the video, but we highly recommend you jump in and watch it. So what this does is, so she's a Stanford Graduate School of Business professor. She actually teaches a class with Avinash. And she did some research in her marketing class on what storytelling, like data behind storytelling. And basically what they came up with is that if you present data in a presentation, people are going to remember 5% of the content. So that doesn't matter who you are. You could be the president, you could be whoever, they're going to remember 5% of the information. If you do it in a story format, people are going to remember 63%. So it's really, really important if you're spending all this time creating presentations and crafting these kind of stories that you want people to remember it. Another funny thing we have here is a cartoon from the New Yorker. So I'll give you a second to read this. You know, it keeps me from looking at my phone every 2 seconds, and the guy's wearing the dog collar. I think this is really funny just because we're in a mobile-first world. But anyway, the story behind this is that the editor of the New Yorker is this guy, Bob Minkoff. And he was interviewed asking, how he chooses between which of these cartoons he wants to show on a weekly basis. People send in thousands and thousands of them, and he has to choose 18. So what he said was, and it's a great line, it's not the ink, it's the think. So when you think about this, the easiest thing we can fix in our presentations is what we see on the page. But really, we want to get to the root cause and what are you thinking about that is causing you to put that ink on the page. So don't worry so much about the ink itself, but worry about what are you thinking about that's causing you to write that. And I think that's really powerful. Second, most of us have kind of gone through a presentation like this where you're presenting in front of a big audience and the owner of the presentation says, you have 20 minutes and you can have a max of 15 or 25 slides or whatever it is. Usually it's an arbitrary number, and what ends up happening is you go back to your deck, you see that, okay, I have 50 slides and I can only have 25. So you'll try to go through and delete a few and say, okay, these 5 were redundant, I don't need them. And then you'll take the other 45, you'll cram the information into 25, and you'll go. So that's really not a good practice. It takes away from the story itself, and it's not something we recommend. So the idea here is not to limit slides. That's a bad idea, but limit ideas. The reason that a presentation that has 100 slides doesn't work is not because of the slides. It's because you're trying to cram too many concepts into people, and we just don't have the capacity to absorb that much information. So again, don't limit slides, limit ideas. And we'll give you kind of an example of what the bad looks like and how we would fix it. So we'll make fun of ourselves here. The future is here is kind of our tagline, and then there's 4 different things. The first thing that'll happen when this here is, the problem here is that there's too many ideas on this slide. And the first thing that's going to happen when we present this is you're going to stop listening to me, and you're going to read this slide and come up with your own kind of notions about what you think this means. And that's the problem, because I'm the presenter, I am the presentation. You want to be focused on me and let me tell the story if you want to engage with it. So how we would change this would be, instead of that, okay, now the future is here. You read the slide and you come back to me. I can set the notion of what Google is doing in this future, in this time, to make sure that we're telling you kind of why this is important. And then you can go through the individual slides one at a time, the self-driving car, Google Fiber, etc. So just even breaking it down, just because I have 4 different slides or 5 different slides instead of 1 does not mean that it's going to take 5 times as long, but it's going to be a much better way to present that information. Last but not least, before we get into the concept, we love this photo. So it's just of an aquarium, obviously, but we'd like to kind of go with the notion that we are outsiders looking into your businesses right now. So there's a lot of nuances that we don't know about your business. We don't expect to know everything, and it's not necessarily important. But what is important is that you kind of come into this with an open mind and say, we're looking at this from outsiders. We have a different point of view than you. So that's really all we're trying to think. Think of us as kind of flies on the wall or people looking into the aquarium. You understand the inside, we understand the outside, and we can see it from a different perspective, and just use those principles to kind of guide you on your way. So we'll go ahead and walk through the first of the 4 that we're going to cover today.
Great. So I think the first rule is one of the most important ones. I think we both agree on that. And the first rule is don't create handouts. When people get up to do a presentation, they often fall into the trap of creating a handout for their audience rather than creating a backdrop for the story they're going to tell. So let's take a look at sort of one option or one typical slide we often see here at Google.
I've sent this slide, by the way.
So yeah, I didn't want to call it out for that one. But basically here we have a bunch of text, stats, data, some images, some stock photos, all developed into one single slide. The backdrop, it takes away from you, the presenter. And there's 2 fatal flaws in this. The first fatal flaw is your audience are going to be reading this. You're going to be standing up there. You are the presentation, as Jason discussed earlier, but the audience is going to be trying to read and decipher what's on this slide. So it fails on that thing. Then necessarily when you send out your deck afterwards to the audience, they're not going to read through all of the different information points. If you've got a long 50-slide deck covered in text, data, numbers, make it simple, make the story right, and get their interest and keep their attention. Second of all, I've created a slide here about the telephone market in the UK, just to give you an example of an idea about how you can create data within a slide to make it more effective and tell that story. So if you click on, there we go, working. So in 2016, we can see that the amount of queries for mobile telephones in the UK has grown 2%. Good news?
Great.
Great. But what's behind that? Let's dig a little bit deeper into the numbers. Uh-oh, desktop queries are down 11% year on year. Well, I thought it was positive 2% 2 minutes ago, but that's only the start of the story. We know that consumers are changing from searching on desktop to searching on mobile. So, let's look a little bit deeper, and we find that tablet queries are also down year on year. So this is complementing the trend that we're seeing in a shift in consumer behavior towards mobile. And then finally, you cement your point with nice big green 22% plus year on year change queries in mobile searches for mobile phones. So that just allows you to shift through your story by animations and a little bit slower to allow you to dig deeper into each one of those data points rather than throwing 3 data points on, or 4 data points in this case, on the slide initially. Talk your way through each data point and allow the user, the recipient, to come on that journey with you.
All right, so I'll cover rule 2. So take everything away that isn't absolutely essential. So the slide that I'm about to show you is painful to watch. I know it's painful to present too. Nobody has a good time with this. But whether you're presenting to a really big audience or a really small audience, you want to make sure that whatever is coming across on the slide is like the so what. What does that mean to me? And if you can't get to that quickly, then they're going to lose interest. So this is a data dump. I apologize in advance. I did not create this. But if you look, there's just a million different things on this slide. How am I as an end user supposed to, look at this and say, what is the action you want me to do? So one, somebody put a lot of time and energy into this. It's great data, but it's a handout. It's something that has way too much information that I'm going to read. And all this is going to do is it's going to start a data conversation that we don't want to have. I don't want to dig through and say, how did I get the impression share from a stable impression share versus a stable clicks? Like, what was the calculation that I did? That should be an irrelevant factor. What should matter is that I did all this research. This is the action on it. If you want to talk about it later, we can. But the action that you need to take from this is X, Y, Z. So we want to make sure we change this a little bit. Sometimes these are necessary. You have to have them. But it's really important to highlight what is important on this slide right from the get-go, as opposed to letting me read it and kind of figure out what I want to know from this. So we changed it to this. One thing you'll notice if I go back, this shows investment on the bottom line. So that's money going out. Nobody likes to see that. So we actually flipped it and said, okay, we did a little more research and found out that if you spend this and you get those clicks that we're talking about, your actual return, your net profit is going to be Y. So this is it. We changed this to net profit. It's a little bit more of a good concept. Also, we highlighted what the recommendation is. There's a bunch of recommendations there at the bottom. We're not asking you to go for the total opportunity. We're asking you to go for some of those opportunity. But again, we're getting to the point really, really quickly about what does this mean for me, which is really, really important. Because business owners and just clients want to know what the impact is on their business, not what do I have to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we'll go to the next rule.
So I'm guilty of this one, so I'm actually going to show you one of my complex visualizations that I thought would be a great idea to show how much I know and how much research I had done into this problem for this client. So yeah, got a little bit ahead of myself, but how about this? Did you know that there's 55 different search terms here for mobile phone names and mobile phone contracts and categories? What it does is this shows the difference between the cost of CPCs on Google search versus Google shopping. That's great, right? Everyone just loves looking at that? No, of course not. There's no insight there. But what I was really trying to do was convey that Google shopping is a great product, that it's performing really, really well, and how to get our clients to, grow their expertise, improve their feeds, and, get a better ROI. So what I should have done for this slide was this. So overall, we're achieving a CPA or sale, cost per sale, of $1.41 cheaper on Google Shopping than we are on Google Search across the board. Why? Because that, spiked interest among the business owner and not just a tiny little metric, which sometimes we can be a little bit Google focused on. So what I want to do is tell the clients, let's go shopping. Let's, invest in the future. It's programmatic advertising. It's e-commerce. This is what we need to do. This is what's sustainable for your business going forward. But what I wanted to do was show how much research I had done to show that, I was doing my job, but let's be more, customer focused where possible, simplify, and get the best possible outcome for everybody.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, there's a time and a place for graphs and those very complicated things that you just have to show. Sometimes it's in a handout, sometimes it's not in a presentation. So make sure, like you said, you're thinking of the end user and how this is going to come across and not just what's going to look prettiest in my deck.
Yeah. But there are times when we do have to dump a lot of data. There are businesses and there's times necessary where you need to do a lot of data comparison and do basically a data puke. And this is one great example here. So this is for brand marketers in the car business, basically. And this gives sentiment across all different types of car manufacturers and what they mean to different types of people. So this is great data, but it's compiled in such a big way that it's hard to digest. So what we can do here, for example, is take a look at competitors. So if I'm VW in this case, let's take a look at Toyota, Kia, and see where are their brand metrics different from mine. Are we trying to compete with those on, a need-to-know basis? Are we trying to compete with them on a customer love basis? And then we can break it out really, really simply just by overlaying some grayscale on the other different car manufacturers within that industry. What we could also do is we could separate out by the different types of metrics rather than separating by competitors. So is, for example, Ram in this case, being much more of a brand love company compared to a Toyota, who we will be comparing ourselves against. So while we have this huge amount of data, we can separate it out into different slides to tackle different questions in a lot more digestible way. So that's just a really great way to separate things out into either competitors or into different types of data love and brand metrics, which it makes just a little bit more human and personable to tell that story through.
I I love going back 2 slides. The known for something, the VW is a really, really big one. I hope it's not for emissions.
Yeah, well, that's said about that better. Great.
Okay, so a couple things we wanted to show you. Those are the 4 principles we want to cover today. There's actually 10, so make sure you log on and check those other ones out. But a cool video, we're not going to play the video right now, but something you should highly check out, and make sure you subscribe to their page as well. So MSL Group is a subsidiary of Publicis, and they do this great little video of, about storytelling and the power of it. But one of the things that they talk about is how our brains, despite evolution, we still look for the story to kind of understand something. So they even talk about there was these like 3 shapes, like 2 circles and a triangle, and it was like a story of love and battle and like all this. And literally there's no context. It's just 3 little shapes, and that's the story that people came up with. So making sure that you're understanding that concept behind it is going to help you create these better presentations moving forward. And then also Jennifer, her video she posts through Stanford Graduate School of Business. We'll share both of these links in this page so you can actually follow them. But great videos to watch. She does these like 3 to 5 minute snippets of kind of miniature marketing classes that she goes through. Very, very kind of compelling.
Yeah, I think one point just to note as well is, you can always, what we would suggest doing is going from simple earlier on in the storytelling into more data heavy towards the end. I said, if you start with data heavy towards the start of your presentation, you're going to spend the next 10, 15, 20 minutes, however long it may be, for people trying to sit there and figure out what does this data mean. Whereas if you tell the story in progressive small steps, you're sort of building those blocks and letting the audience understand where you're going throughout the presentation.
Yeah.
So that's just a little tip.
No, it's a good point. You can always dig deeper and say like, okay, this is the basic number. And if you want to ask me a question, great, let's go deep into the story and like get a little more complicated. Yeah. But it's hard to go from being complicated to getting simpler. All they're going to think about is that original slide. So don't forget to join the partners community. We have the link set up right here. We'll give you a second to copy that down or check it out. But you can learn more about today's session and then also kind of other sessions we have kind of down the pipeline. Yeah. But yeah, definitely join the partners community and get connected. So we're going to do a live Q&A now. So go ahead and post your questions to these page. We have a couple in there already, so we'll go ahead and check these out. And then if we don't have time to follow up or to finish all of them today, we can follow up afterwards and go from there. Okay, so first question. How do I know what the mix of photo-based slides to text-based slides should be?
It's an interesting one. It really depends on your presentation and what your point is trying to get across. I think for more advanced presenters, picture-based slides are probably better.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're still quite new to presenting and need some text there to back you up or keep your cue on, perhaps that can be helpful. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's probably true. So there's definitely, like we said earlier, there's a time and a place for text, and there's a time and a place for graphics and all of that. You don't need to just make every single slide a picture or like no words and just kind of like talk about it and ignore it. But I think that PowerPoint is a tool. You should use it effectively that way. So
I would bring it back to it's more about the think in the slide rather than the ink. So if you're using a visual or you're using text, remember why you're doing that. Is it to spark emotion? Is it to spark a thought? But at the end of the day, you want to bring it back to yourself as a presenter.
Yeah. Second question here. What's the biggest mistake you make in your own presentations?
I think the biggest mistake that I personally make is, and I showed you an example of it earlier on, is that I try to show how much research I've done into this problem and give you guys as much data as I can. I think the one thing I've learned over the last couple of years is that you should, do all that research, make sure you're solidly tight on it, but then, put up just a small bit of think into the slide and let yourself speak about it and bring it back to yourself. That's probably my biggest one.
I think mine is creating handouts. So we try to not do this, but we'll get questions from our agencies that are really specific, and we want to just kind of send them this. Basically, it's sending them a handout. Because it has all the information and everything, but it's at that point I might as well not even be presenting. I might as well just be reading off the slide. And if I can accomplish the same goal by sending them an email, I shouldn't be presenting that. So I think that's the biggest mistake I make, and I try to actively kind of fix that. What's your favorite principle?
My favorite principle is probably just don't create handouts.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Full stop. I think it's just a combination of people trying to do everything for everyone and trying to just be too inclusive.
Sure.
And it's time to just step it back a bit and, you know, focus on yourself as a presenter, be confident in yourself rather than trying to create handouts for everybody.
Okay, what should be included on presenter bio slides, if anything? So we do these in every presentation that we do. We have stock photos like headshots that we took of all of us, and it says what your title is and what your name is, and that's really it. And then I think what should be included on there, that's it. Just your picture and your name, maybe your company or whatever. And then it should be either your job or the person who's introducing you to explain what it is you actually do, and why it's important that they listen to you. That's if you're presenting to kind of like a bigger audience. If you're doing, like if I were presenting to my boss, there'd be no reason to have a bio slide. They know that.
I hope she knows
Yeah. But if you're presenting to an audience of people you don't know, then that's what I would do. And just make sure you have kind of a little bio written up of, these are my accomplishments. This is why I'm kind of an expert in this field. And this is why you should listen to me for the next, 20 to 30 minutes or whatever the case may be.
There's a good one here. Okay, so if the slides tend to be a little bit more basic in how they're presented, how will people who didn't attend the presentation or want takeaways understand the basic slides? So I think this is an important one. First of all, if they really want to know your content, they should probably come to your presentation. If people are going to make the effort, they want to be there. But secondly, I think what you can do is you can actually create a handout for people rather than a separate handout in separation to your slides, because the context and the insights that you're giving in your presentation won't be available just by looking at your slides. So it's important to, if you are going to send out notes later on, to accompany that in some sort of handout format, which is absolutely fine for that reason. So yeah, make sure to separate the difference between the handout for afterwards and the actual presentation that you present on the day.
Yeah, I think they both play a role.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
you should be doing things as follow-up stages, but the actual presentation itself should not be a handout, and you should send these kind of, that can be very high level and less text and all of that, but then make sure you follow up with the detailed information.
Absolutely.
We have one more question in here we want to cover. So people always want specific on costs, how much they have to spend before you even looked at their goals yet. How do you answer or present to them? So yeah, I think this is important. And if we go back to those other slides here, I can go back and find it. I believe in here we actually have what the investment is. So if you look there at the top, it's 2.58 million. But that's not the highlight of the slide. If you look at the bottom of it, the bolded part is the net, and that's what you're going to be presenting when you're talking about this. You're not going to be saying, hey, we want you to invest 2.6 million. It's, we want you to make 2.9 million. So I think you're right. You do have to present that information, and you do want to make sure you show that. But just changing the conversation away from getting caught up in the data and to what is the actual impact that this is going to have on my business. I think that's the most effective way to present it.
Yeah. It's a couple more coming through.
Yeah. Why do I see more classes online with talking heads and no slides than separate downloads? What do you advise for teaching online classes, and how much do you need to show yourself?
I actually have taken a number of online classes, so this one maybe I can shed a light. We're both not experts on this, so this is more about personal. Yeah. But I do like, rather than just having slides on an online class, to actually feel like you're talking to somebody and feel like it's more of a live interaction. So yeah, I think there's probably it should be a split there if possible on the online class, between sort of 50-50 between slides and the actual teacher online myself. That's what I found good, but again, we're not the expert on that, but yeah, that's just a personal opinion.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Is there a max or minimum time that you would recommend for each slide in a presentation? I don't think so. So I would go back to, it's really how long it takes you to tell the story. Yeah. So there's some slides that we kind of breezed over in 5 seconds, and there's some that we spent several minutes on. It's really dependent on what you need to tell that story. Maybe it's just one quick picture and you're there for 1 second, or you just want the audience to see it. You don't even want to say anything. It's just like a powerful something or another. As a general rule of thumb, if I'm not going to spend a handful of seconds, like 3 or 4 or 5 seconds on it, I probably won't add it in there, but not because of the time limit, because I don't think it's valuable to the story. Yeah. So I wouldn't look at it from constraints on time or number of slides. And then we could take maybe one more. How long does it take to make a presentation?
How long is a piece of string? But I would say is that presentations especially if you're speaking to a large group of people, do take a significant amount of time to make them simple and effective. So if, for example, we had a half-hour presentation today, this probably took us the guts of what, 3.5 hours to make, from going from a 50, 60 slide deck to condensing it down into what we want, making sure the messaging is correct. So yeah, it does take a significant amount of time to get it right. But yeah, I don't know. For a specific timeline, I don't have one, but it just takes
it takes as long as it takes.
Yeah.
But so we'll go ahead and follow up with any other questions that come throughout the rest of the day. So please keep posting those, and we'll kind of follow up as we go. We'll also post the different information for these videos and slides that you want to follow. So thank you again, and hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.